If you have a job, you've probably dealt with exactly what we're getting ready to talk about. In today's world, where everyone is always connected and you have to collaborate all the time, you may have this feeling of just being overloaded with relationships. Like with all the work you have to get done, you just don't have the time or the energy to nurture all these potential connections with other people at work. Well, finally, we may have a solution. We're joined by Pranav Gupta, Assistant Professor of Business Administration at Gies College of Business. He's co-authored a new paper on this topic, which was published in the journal Research in Organizational Behavior. Pranav, we've been talking about information overload for decades, but in this paper, you're talking about something called relational overload.
Thank you, Aaron. Really excited about talking more about the paper that we've just had. This is a collaboration between me and a few of my colleagues, Ethan at Harvard, Mark at INSEAD, and Paul at UCLA. I suppose I'll dive right in. The way the nature of work has shifted, we are now being inundated with so many emails and messages and just the changing nature of work. Our understanding of it was managing your attention, or the whole idea of designing your organizations such that each person's or each team's scope of work and hence their span of attention is boundaries are put around that, and you can focus on that. Because the nature of work has changed, we are now seeing that we have to keep up with a lot more information that is beyond these boundaries. In the paper, we call it boundary permeability because of technology, because of nature of work, because of distributed work, all of those kinds of things. We have to change technology. It's not just that we are facing a lot more information. That is an individual perspective. Like me as a person has to go through my different inboxes. So I am treating everything coming to me as information. But in reality, it is not just pieces of information. It is requests by people. I am now interacting with a dozen or 40 or 50 different people in any given week. So there are many more people that I'm interacting with, working through your to-do lists or prioritizing your different tasks that you have in mind. That kind of an approach, while it works with information, it tends to not work with relationships and people. So relational overload is, if you can separate the two things out, that you're not only dealing with a lot of messages, a lot of information, a lot of new things changing in your project, you're also dealing with a lot more people. And each interaction that you're having has a downstream consequence.
We've all had the feeling of an overflowing email inbox. It can feel really overwhelming, but it's not just the number of messages, it's that feeling that there are important people waiting on you in there. And that environment has gotten even more hyper-connected now that we're all on Slack or Teams. We're constantly pinging each other. The boundaries between teams and departments get blurred, and the potential for valuable relationships just explodes, doesn't it?
Absolutely. For example, I have a 5-year-old. I have a 5-year-old son, and if I have spoken to him and we've decided in the morning that, oh, Dad, once you're done with work, we are going to build this Lego spaceship. And I said, yes, we'll do that once I'm done with work at around 6 o'clock. And something happens and I have an important meeting. And for some reason, I choose to prioritize that meeting. If I don't end up having a conversation with him about me not keeping my time with him, he will, one, be disappointed, but there is a downstream consequence. If this was a to-do list and I had put on my to-do list in the morning 6 things to do, 3 of which are high priority, and I got done with 2 things and I did not do the third thing, at the end of the day, the third thing is not going to have any feelings about it. So the way we deal with information, the deal with email inboxes, is very different and have very different consequences. Right? Next day, I can prioritize it. But in this case, I've left my son with a feeling. And if I repeat that thing again and again and again, this valuable relationship, the nature of this relationship starts to change. When you take this kind of a valuable relationship and superimpose it in our work lives, think about how much of productivity or how much of value that you can build with the people that you're working is getting lost.
As humans, we crave connection. We need to collaborate to get things done, but it can be overwhelming. And I think the traditional solutions for overload, like setting strict boundaries, sticking to routines, might actually hurt those work relationships or make relational overload worse. And so in this paper, you and your co-authors propose a solution you call transactive control.
When there is a lot of tasks in front of us, I am the one through my executive center that makes a top-down decision on how do I want to lay out these tasks? How do I want to prioritize these tasks? So that is hierarchical control, in which there's one subject and multiple objects, and what I say goes because I understand the value of organizing this work. Transactive control is not saying don't do hierarchical control. It's saying that in the domain of objects, which is things that are happening in the physical world, and you are the only subject, hierarchical control has certain heuristics, and that is the best way to go about it. Both parties or multiple parties have equal amount of say or a dynamic, in a more lay terms, a dance of how we are going to organize ourselves. So it's not just dynamic because more information is coming at you. It is dynamic because everybody has a level of autonomy, a level of perception, a level of priorities that may not match in the beat.
Your research breaks down transactive control into 3 key ingredients. So first, you need what you call mutually transparent availability. So yes, that's about being more transparent with your calendar, but also about workflows and your workload.
The first step to think is, when are we going to coordinate? And then the next is, how are we going to go about it? So the when bit answers to or mutually transparent availabilities. So the most simplistic, most practical think about example of that could be the new forms of technical products that we have, which are like Calendarly or Google Calendar, in which I can share my calendar with somebody else. So what this is doing, if you understand the cognition aspect of it, is it is making it easier for us, for me to find time to talk to you because I have access to a part of your calendar. Otherwise, it would have taken us 4 or 5 emails to be, exchanged. And every time you have to exchange these many emails, it is not just that you are losing time. It is also that I am demanding your attention, the very resource that is scarce, and you are demanding my attention. For example, over the past month, I was in India. If you sent me an email, you had to wait mandatory 12 hours for me to respond. And then I replied back, and then I wait mandatory 12 hours for you to respond. But it is also a thing that happens to be that it is pulling each of our attention. If for some reason I am indisposed for something, you're now lost 24 hours. So the availability bit, technology can be used to simplify that and say that how can we reduce how much we are imposing on each other's attentions just to find a time to have this conversation. So a level of transparency or a way to or a mechanism to reduce how much attention we are demanding just to figure out how to build joint attention is going to be useful.
Okay, so we've shared calendars. The second piece of this you call coordination of synchrony. It's about recognizing when everyone needs to be on the same page, working together, focused on the same thing at the same time. Why is this piece important?
Once we figure out the when, right, now it is the how. And in how we are working in 2 different ways. For those in software engineering or in software firms, you understand that there are 2 tracks of where careers are built. One is the IC role, which is the individual contributor. These are folks who are good developers. They are very good at doing, fairly complex coding work. And as you grow in stature, you are building the architectures, like really fancy stuff, but they are individual people who are really good with the technology. The second track is that of the manager, the engineering manager, in which your job is coordinating, scoping, right? Getting these smart people to work with each other, with the clients to build the product that is in function and ongoing. So you can think of this as production and coordination, right? And I'm using this as just a contemporary example. Much of the work has both these aspects, production and coordination. For the coordination bit, synchrony helps. Coming on the same page, figuring out what is the scope, do we understand each other? We need synchronous, which is at the same time, we are building a joint attention, right? I am explaining something to you, you are questioning back. That is the most productive, most efficient way of solving the problem. And once we figure out, all right, we get it, this is the scope, this is the implementation, and then we can go back in our own words, do deep, independent, deep work, highly productive, good things, come back and synchronize. So one form of how joint attention has to be managed is creating synchrony. In the time that we have together, do we understand that we are making the best use of that time? So how quickly do I respond? And then when I am responding, do we understand that this is the time frame that we have so that we can do the best we can get the best outcome within the time that we have.
Okay, so we've covered transparency and synchrony. The next piece is reciprocity. Of course, not all teamwork is done synchronously, so this includes things like email and instant messaging, that back and forth. It's about creating norms for responding to each other in a way that shows respect for everyone's time without driving each other crazy with live, synchronous interaction all the time.
A meaningful way, outside of the academic conversation, a meaningful way to think about reciprocity is the idea of hygiene, right? When germ theory was, figured out and discovered, it would take a lot of time to explain why germs matter and how they cause a lot of diseases. But a simple intervention like wash your hands before each surgery completely changed the game. That is the type of hygiene. So reciprocity in this case means, given that not everybody can be synchronous all the time, we cannot expect a quick response, highly synchronous response every time, but that should not mess up our relational outcomes. We should have some hygiene that looks of the kind that, all right, if I have received an email, even if I cannot respond to that email immediately, I respond to it by saying, I'll get back to you in 2 days, right? So reducing the uncertainty around what is the expectation, right? So a common way things go bad is I have this inbox of like a wall of emails facing me with new things getting added. I'm working on some tasks. I look at the email and I say, I need to respond to this, but this will take me more than a couple of minutes. I need to sit down and respond. The day passes by and it's the next day. While this is happening, the other person is waiting on you, right? So a small nudge, a small hygiene could be that when we write an email, because this is transactive control, when I write an email, I understand that the ask is a little more than 2 minutes or 5 minute response, right? Then I can say, I understand that this like, give me an estimate of by when you will be able to get back to it. So you are also helping your colleagues break it down to the level of, all right, I can give you a quick response and then I can get back to you. This preserves the relationship. This puts the information, in the context of the relationship.
Now, these all seem like basic office norms that we should all agree are important. But in your paper, you talk about why these are sometimes easier said than done.
While we may understand that others also have, important things going on, we oftentimes, or depending on the intensity of the ask, might start to harbor difficult, like ill feelings, or start feeling let down, or start putting undue pressure, or start taking undue pressure about expectations. So the reality of this matter is that this is not just a physical world and social world thing. It is how our mind processes these things. So to the extent we can understand, we have heuristics that are not aligned with or that are creating a lot of trouble, right? It's the same thing. If I've for some reason could not keep my promise of playing with my son at 5:30, right? I should go back and have a conversation about it. And I should then set up a new expectation of what we will do next time, rather than letting him keep learning about these about how to deal with or how to build up a perception around this event that has gone by, right, of me not responding in time or not keeping my promise. So this stance, right, is not saying that we focus on individual attention and be less distracted and be less focus on an individual attention. This approach is saying that we accept the reality that we have a lot more going on and there are consequences of how we deal with it. To the extent we prioritize individual attention management, we will find ourselves making these kinds of mistakes, right? There will be misalignments in how our relationships, of how the people are dealing with us, which will have downstream bad consequences, or what I would call dysfunctions in the team will start to crop up.
It's a tough balance sometimes, being responsive but also protecting your own boundaries and privacy. And when those expectations clash, that's where things can get potentially messy, which is, I'm guessing, where organizations have a role to play here. What do you think we, or even leaders of a team or organization, can learn from this paper?
From a practice standpoint, the first thing would be a shift in mindset in thinking in terms of not just individual success or individual performance, but collective, collaborative outcomes, right? So we are not trying to protect each member's attention. We are trying to protect the spurts of joint attention where collaboration happens, where information exchange happens, and joint problem solving happens. We are trying to protect that or maximize that. So sometimes that would mean we have to shift the way we work with each other. Some of the solutions could be technological, right? Like the Calendly, like some plugins in your Slack chat or your email systems, and some changes would be cultural. For example, when we start a meeting, we set some boundaries around understanding how much availability does each person has. For example, if it's a half an hour meeting, some people might have to run off right after the half an hour mark. Others might have 45 minutes or an hour. If it is unclear between the members at the start of the meeting of what the end looks like, I may hold on to the key points I want to say until the last minute. And at that point, my colleague here, whose inputs would be the most valuable, has already mentally started to transition into the other meeting. So I take only the last minute out of the 30 minutes to say the most important thing, and they've already checked out. So a small hygiene check right at the beginning of the meeting, just like your hand washing, says this is the time. Some people might have to rush. You go around. If it is just three people, you can actually talk about it. And then that helps all of us set the bar on these are the key things. We should bring them up sooner, or we should make sure if you don't bring them up sooner, we schedule a time to do so. If this cannot be done now, setting the expectations of reciprocity or synchrony next meeting versus I'll get back to you on this point specifically later. So this is a very small changes. These are cultural changes. These can be driven by individual managers, or these can be driven more holistically of how we teach around how distributed work gets accomplished, in a remote way.
If you remember 3 words from this episode, it's transparency, synchrony, reciprocity. And there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about constantly adapting, evolving, and finding what works best for you and your team. Because as this paper has taught us, when we achieve transactive control, it's not just about reducing overload, it's about unlocking a more productive and more fulfilling way of working. That was Pranav Gupta, Assistant Professor of Business Administration at Gies College of Business. The paper is called Collective Attention and Relational Overload, a theory of transactive control in high permeability intra-organizational environments. It was published in Research in Organizational Behavior. You can read more about this and other research at giesbusiness.illinois.edu.